welcome to the Kink Perspective. My name's Chris. I'm a psychotherapist and consultant. On today's show, I'm going to talk about something that has been going, something inside of our lifestyle within the topic that we don't often get to or address. It sometimes could lie or do be on the outliers of our lifestyle. And it's the topic of objectification within the context of BDSM. And I really want to kind of get to the point where we're understanding this fascinating topic inside of our world of kink. On today's show, I have a returning guest. Brooke's been with me a couple of times now, so third time's the charm. And she's going to be recounting some of her personal experiences and journeys through and insights into the fetish that is often misunderstood. So I want you all to sit back, listen, enjoy, as Brooke joins me again here in the studio today. Hi, Brooke. Thank you again for taking some time out of your schedule to talk to me about this fun and exciting fetish.
I feel very humbled by that.
Well, I definitely enjoy our conversations. You've definitely illuminated a lot of different subjects for me in this exploration between kink and psychology.
Which is crazy to me because you're the one with far more experience in both of those realms. But I will do my best.
Managing between the two, sometimes, it's how we learn is by talking to others and asking some of these important questions and some of these things. And what a lot of you don't know is beforehand, whenever I'm going to talk with someone, sometimes it's a little bit easier if we do questions so we have a direction of the way this is going to go. And so I sat and Brooke asked me, she said, "Oh, do you have some questions for me?" I said, "Sure, let me fire a few off at you." So I think we're going to start with the very first one I had for you, Brooke. Can you explain to everyone what objectification means within the context of your experiences within the lifestyle itself?
So objectification to me, I guess, means either viewing someone as an object or treating someone as an object. Both could be present or just the one, perhaps insinuating some degree of ineptitude, really. So it would make a really good Venn diagram I started fleshing out some of the things that I feel had objectification components to them. You've got your clothed male, naked female, or clothed female, naked male, hookah, pet play, cuckolds, any of the dollification, bimbofication, sissies, faunophilia, which is human furniture. And then I think it can start to go further down the spectrum, perhaps from the more lighter objectification play to things where the degradation and humiliation components are becoming more extreme. Perhaps you're looking at CNC, or some people's dynamics include the ability to share their submissives with others, things like that. I always thought, sorry, you go.
Oh, no, that's okay. It's just quite interesting because as you're kind of running a big gambit here. I really never, because for me, when we talk objectification, I think one of the things I instantly gravitate to in my mind is ornophilia, where we are literally talking about someone imitating or replicating a chair or a table. I've never really thought about it in the broader sense of how that would apply to, dollification or bimbofication, or even cuckolding. Like I'm sitting here as you're saying that, and I'm actually taking a couple of notes, and I'm like, well, that's an interesting observation and overlap for that. I know in the humiliation and degradation, which is something that I take part in on occasion, it's interesting to see a perspective that it's kind of a very outlier, I would say, maybe inside of that Venn diagram of objectification.
It's a large umbrella. Like, so thinking about something like pet play, I identify as a human pet. That would be one of the kind of layers of my trifle, so to speak. So if you're putting aside the aesthetics of tails and ears, which can be a little objectifying and degrading, I I say human pet because I don't enter sort of some people psychologically animorph and they enter sort of kitten space or puppy play or these sorts of things. That's not me. However, when you're looking at some of these other things, such as being made to crawl or having furniture restrictions, if you're looking at an image on the internet and there's a woman with scantily clad on a collar and leash, or perhaps she is the trope of drinking the milk from the bowl on the floor. That's very objectifying, and that's pet play. People
Sure.
will either look at that and go, "That is just so strange," or people will look at that and say, "That's really hot." And this is where we sit on a spectrum. I think objectification for me can be quite subtle,
Sure.
and it can go all the way to the end where you have little to no regard for someone's feelings or pleasure.
No, and it does make sense. I mean, I understand objectification of how we view other forms of other people, where somebody might find how attractive somebody might find somebody else, or what they think, or what they're
Mm,
seeing, and that scale that we have in our mind, um, of how we emotionally respond. If it's going to invoke and stir those feelings of passion and desire in us, or conversely stoke repulsion. I've never I've seen both in similar photos. I think because I look at that in a different realm of objectification, a lot of O's inside of there. Um, that when we consider these different things, I think for me, I view that in a different light where we're heading more towards the either only sexualizing somebody or in the aspect of humiliating someone. And then I kind of, for me, it takes on a completely different realm altogether.
mm,
And that's okay because, we had mentioned in our pre conversation here that we all have the lifestyle is very nuanced for us. And the things like we each individually like and enjoy is what makes it such a wide variety and aspect of appeal for us.
mm.
Um, like the weird people who enjoy rope, for example, I don't really get that. And that's
Ooh.
okay. If you want to spend 95 hours trying to set up for one scene and, we've done our weekend and left, more power to you. So, um, no shade at my rope people because I've had it, but don't send me hate mail because I've interviewed a bunch of rope people here, including Brooke and a couple of others. So yes, no shade. I'm just lightly joking. For you though, Brooke, what initially drew you to begin your exploration and objectification as a fetish?
Mm. Um, I think very early in my journey, I was approaching DS as sort of a sexual expression or something that was trying to I was trying to map out what my sexual blueprint was because it's not, I guess, what would be standard. Um, and I think a lot of people initially might approach their lifestyle in that space. Some will stay there and keep it in a very kind of play based way. Others will go a little deeper over time. But many women wish to be overpowered. I am someone who eroticizes violence, and more so than violence and pain is control and power. That's sort of the central axis to all of my pinks. So one of the first components of objectification that came up for me as being appealing was images of people being stepped on or, dragged around by their hair or body. Impact play, but more so kind of disciplinarian style. So over the knee spanking, I
Yeah,
find very
OGK.
satisfying. There's humiliation components involved in there. Anything where, fingers exploring mouths, that's a very intimate act that can be quite degrading, but in an affectionate way. My own relationship with objectification isn't that I would like to feel worthless, which some people adore. Some people are running up that hill wanting to be sort of nothing.
Sure.
I swing far to the other way where I am wanting to feel like a cherished object. I like
You put on a pedestal? No.
calm down. I I like to be seen as um
An object
adding
of desire.
an object of desire, yes, but probably more so than that. There's reasons that we like to posture ourselves at someone's feet. It's being there as a source of comfort,
Sure.
company.
But would you consider, because that's a valid point, many, dominants who are much more into protocol or even high protocol dominance, which is a form that I follow in the lifestyle.
Mm.
Would you consider, like, when we are out either at a dungeon or if we go to a high protocol party where submissives and slaves are kneeling or resting in a rest position next to their dominants, would you consider that a form of objectification?
Yes, I would. Um, I definitely would. Everything's about intent, right? So in that sense, that makes me feel as though a dominant is showing their submissive off. That is objectification. This is mine, this belongs to me. Property, the word property, ownership, free use, these are all things that resonate very highly with me. And so I think you're tiptoeing into a space of objectification for sure. You mentioned pornophilia before,
Right.
and I have had a very interesting experience where I have done an impact scene at a public event, and because I'm actually not much of an exhibitionist, which probably then plays into humiliation aspect for me,
Right.
being on show in public in high protocol. I then was able to be a footstool, and it was a way for me to overcome sort of the overstimulating environment and sink into myself as an introvert who isn't a huge lover of crowds. So that was helpful. That was helpful for me as well. There was an exhibition in 1970 of sculptures of women who had been made into furniture items.
Right.
There was hat stand, table, chair. The artist's name was Alan Jones. And he was then approached by film director Stanley Kubrick, who asked for permission. First, he asked for him to replicate the sculptures for the movie. And when he didn't wish to do so, he asked for permission to use the idea in the movie A Clockwork Orange. So in Korova milk bar scene, there are human furniture women. There was an outcry, from feminists about this, which I feel it's something that people won't ever be on the same page about. But it's contextual. We think about professional athletes, perhaps. These people are valued by their fans for their game skill, not
Right.
for their humanity. We have a history of wet t-shirt competitions, bikini contests, placing women alongside things that they have no relevant relationship to product for advertising. Cars is a well used one. Beauty contests, etc. We can either look at that as something that's going to negatively affect our self-esteem. My concern might be for sort of a decision, if people are of a decision-making age. There's a lot of really young people on set. They're still developing their self-worth, figuring out that that's not impingent on outside validation of social media clicks and, the dopamine hits of being appreciated for our outward appearance. Things like pornography, which is another objectifying media form, has in
Well,
some
it's
cases
interesting you bring up with the porn industry though. Wouldn't you surmise though that the women have more control there than the men?
perhaps the issue, I think, with pornography can be that it can have a very negative effect on self-esteem because it breeds unrealistic body expectations. So it's pushing some women, into surgery, younger women especially. In some cases, women's labia are being photoshopped out completely or to be smaller. So all of a sudden, our yonis are something else to be added to the list of things to sort of be bashful and anxious about.
Sure.
However, as you say, so a mature woman can surmise perhaps that her worth and power are not derived from outward appearance. And if we've been historically objectified for at least many decades, then choosing it and owning it, for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people, feels very empowering. There's liberation in that. Then does it become demoralizing to be objectified, or is it a symbol of feminine strength? I'd say that's individual specific.
Sure. Well, I think it's the
Mm.
power of communication and consent and desire to explore a fantasy between two participants, whether it is a male or a female or anywhere in between, to
Mm.
decide to become the object of objectification in one way or another. When I was just even
Yes.
perusing some of Alan Jones's furniture, I mean, yes, there are mannequins, mainly it
Mm.
looks like of women. There are some actually live models of men. So it does go both ways, and we have to understand that we. It is also, to me, I could look at it as another way as one of the higher forms of appreciation of the human form, because we're
Yeah.
asking someone to push themselves beyond a physical boundary. We're now going into a mental and an emotional state where we're asking them to go beyond the norm of what they do for someone else's pleasure, which then pleases that individual.
I had a conversation with my sadist once. After we'd done 96 hours of rope, we often talk. And
My God,
I
that's a long day.
I have been a Nyota Mori platter for Mr. Tinker Train. It's a wonderful experience. It's something that we enjoy. Um, and I always so we have desires, right?
Sure.
We have desires, and whatever its meaning is, like perhaps we can grant it an appropriate share of mystery, much as desire itself, the origins of what arouses us is largely mysterious. But I am someone who loves to unpack why. I want this, I want to be objectified, but there's a question that I often shove into my thought process, and it's this: what is the wanting? And so I was trying to unpack that, and it
Okay,
was
that's an
it was
interesting point, and the reason why I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want to interrupt you
oh
because this is valuable here
yeah.
because prior to discussion, which what I do with a lot of my guests is we talk for a little bit, and I had when we joke about things or we talk about things, I said, um, "Oh, I'd love to electrify you,"
Mm.
because and then the question is why.
Mm.
Well, part of it would be because I'm a sadist and I like watching someone squirm and be in torment for my pleasure. So that's
Mm.
one. But two, when you get down to the question of the why, what you're driving really at is why would I want to, because then there's that allure to someone that you're connected to in one fashion or another. And you really want to see what kind of boundary you can push in a safe way or a limit. You can take them right to the edge and hold them there
Mm.
and take them through that experience and guide them through it and
Mm.
allow them into that part of your world or at
I,
least share that experience with them.
I bet I could therapize you. Can we turn the tables, and I'll see how I do
Good luck.
psychoanalyzing the psychologist? So, okay, Chris is sadist. I like to torment and hurt pretty girls. I want their suffering. But what is the wanting? I will bet, because most roads, I think, lead back to here, is that you're wanting to connect. You're looking for a way to connect. And BDSM as a tool has the possibility to be a very deeply connective thing.
Well, sure.
Um,
That's a good broad stroke because what you're talking about is the emotional connection. And that's not bad.
right.
It's close. It's not bad. It's not where all of it is derived from. Sometimes I enjoy inflicting pain because I want to inflict the pain. And because what a lot of, I think, and we're getting off topic, but
Mm.
for sadists, it is about our infliction of pain. It's not we have to also discuss then the realm of hurt and harm. We're not trying to harm anyone, which is
Mhm.
causing irreparable damage. We want to hurt
Of
someone.
course.
And watching someone cry brings me pleasure. And I know
Mhm.
this is odd. Let me clarify this now. And I clarified it earlier when I was talking with Brooke before we started that yes, I am a therapist, but yes, privately I am a sadist. There's nothing wrong, and those two things don't intermix. But
Mhm.
we do have those things that we enjoy. Part of
Mhm.
my connection, the deeper my connection to someone is that that boundary I can push, and in turn they can push me into places that I haven't been before, and I
Mm.
welcome that, and that allows to bring out sides of myself that I never thought were potentially possible, and
Mm.
I do enjoy that. And but it's not pretty girls because the face doesn't matter. It's the
Mm.
experience for me. And then to go beyond that, the next step is I have to be connected. So you were close. If there
Yeah.
is no connection on any realm, nothing. There, it wouldn't matter if it was Kate Beckinsale, who, by the way, I've got a pass on, but um,
Yeah.
it wouldn't
Oh.
matter if there was no connection. If I found out she was dumber than dirt and
Mm.
she held a conversation, and I don't know about a cup. If there was
Mhm.
nothing there, if it was a vapid conversation with anyone, or that surfer dude, all of those things, if everybody gravitates towards something different, but for me, there is an intellectual component. There is the
Mm.
romantic component there. There has to be a motivating factor inside of my sadism or inside of the factor when I want to drive somebody towards being the object of my pain.
Mm.
And I
Well,
I do enjoy that.
context is everything, and that's the same for objectification. No woman wants to be subjected to, a constant stream about her body while she is running a work meeting or, conversing about pertinent current affairs or philosophical topics. Um, the man who is I'm using men and women here just for, but
Sure.
gender non-specific. The the man who is the objectifier must recognize a woman's intellect, as you say, and other admirable qualities. Um, some women want to feel physically appreciated and desired in a way that's separate from her other qualities. But
Sure.
the idea of an intelligent woman being erotically brought to some level of cognitive dysfunction through objectification, degradation, humiliation is extremely yummy. It's very hard to fake. You can't be that for just anyone. It's
No.
for someone sacred and special. Someone needs to have planted some really serious brainworms to take your faculties away.
This is true. Now, I would agree with
Yes.
that. Now, conversely, where a woman's connection, I would probably surmise, or actually through research and study, I will definitely agree that the magnitude for a woman wanting to subject to that level in our context of the lifestyle would be much on based more on a deeper emotional and cognitive level. Conversely,
Yes.
though, with men, it isn't about that. It's about them giving up the power to be objectified because they don't want to retain that power in their private life. They need to let go.
Do you think that that is just for men, or do you think that lots of women are also highly effective in their vanilla lives, and so they're also seeking a bit of reprieve from decision making and roles where they might actually be in control in other areas, so they've got that catharsis.
I mean, it's an interesting point. I've talked to a wide swath of men in different positions of power early in my career or even in the military. When I've used to ask them what they did to relax, and you can kind of extrapolate from there some of their other things. I don't know. Um, you know, I've dated people who were there was a girl I dated. She was an attorney in a very high powered law firm and she was highly intelligent. Um, but personally, in the bedroom, her release for her is she didn't want it. But I don't know if I can say the same that I see in men as far as
Mhm.
wanting to release that power. Is it always the same for
Right.
women or on the same level? Now, for me, for example, in the military, in law enforcement, I have retained my position of dominance. I've never wanted to give up power. When people talked about, oh, you're going to submit to me, I'm like, that'll be a cold day in hell. That'll
Mhm.
happen. You might as well you
Mhm.
have a better chance of like killing me than you do getting me to kneel at your feet because it's just not going to happen.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I can't personally. I think for each individual it varies. I do think there is a stronger emotional driver for women than there is for men.
Yes. Sure.
And I mean that's even count, the studies of why. I remember when, for example, I can't remember, Heidi Fleiss, she was a Hollywood madam to the stars, and the big
Mhm.
scandal broke, and her list wasn't just movie stars, it was CEOs, it was doctors and politicians, obviously predominantly a lot of men. Same when that whole fiasco of Ashley Madison and all these high powered men. And it's not just about the cheating. When some of them started getting caught, especially with that debacle, that
Mm.
was really when they started exploring some of those sides and they got interviewed. Some of them talked about, I just needed to go somewhere where I didn't need to be in control. I needed someone else to take charge because I'm have to make decisions, high powered decisions every day, and it's overwhelming. It is a lot of control to have. And I'd
Mm.
rather be treated like a chair or say, yes, mistress, you can put a cigarette out on me or urinate on me, and I'm okay with that because the decisions are completely removed and they don't get a choice and they're beyond content with it.
So the psychological mechanism of these kinds of desires is shedding the complexity of personhood to sink into a different, simpler form, perhaps.
That, and we can get into the area of that we're not only shedding personhood, but we're shedding responsibility.
Yeah.
We are willingly subjecting ourselves to subservience and servanthood. And not only are we willing to do that, but we're willing to do that with a smile on our face.
Yeah. It's not my reason. It's definitely a reason.
Sure.
I can see how people want the escapism. Um, it's not something that resonates with me, and I kind of circle back a little now to when I was having this discussion with my rigger, and we're looking at some of the we're looking at. He said, "Have you ever noticed that you are a platter, a table, a footstool? You know, you're never a lamp. You know, you're not something decorative." He said, "Pornophilia is service for you. It's just another way that you express service." And that really hit me. I was like, oh, that is totally a puzzle piece clicking into place. I love to be useful. Service is important to me, and so this is one of the things that I can do to show that, I suppose.
Sure.
Mm.
And you had mentioned something earlier, and I think it's something I kind of want to circle back to. We were talking about the catharsis
Mhm.
and the emotional release,
Mhm.
and objectification scenes can really serve as this space for this emotional release. And the psychological aspect here of that is the
Mhm.
catharsis itself, where
Mhm.
somebody may be releasing these pent up emotions and the stress and the anxiety in this controlled setting. And I think that's the one key we're allowing, because at the end of the day, we are still dictating what the space is, whether it's the dominant setting it up and
Mhm.
to everybody agreeing. This emotional release leads to these feelings of relief and even euphoria. And that's what you're talking about now, which then
Mhm.
leads me for you to the question is, can you describe to me, sorry, it's not one of the ones I sent you, but it's something I thought of. Can you
Mhm.
describe to me how objectification scenes have provided you with this sense of a emotional release and catharsis, and maybe what emotions or even stresses do you find a release from during these scenes? Sorry, I know that's a left field
Well,
question.
I like curveballs. You make me think. You know, uh, like I said before, I live for the polarity of objectification. So affectionate degradation sort of, it muddles my brain to hear certain phrases or labels that are objectifying nestled in the context of an affectionate sentence. So, um, we can play with the word. Um, we can play with the word fuck toy, and on its own, it's very degrading. Now you add beautiful fuck toy, suddenly it has these appreciative connotations. We go a step further and we put my beautiful fuck toy, adding possessive pronouns, it's taking on that ownership quality. And all of a sudden, you're then tiptoeing into my personal space of yum. I'm not someone who is highly stressed. I don't have a need for catharsis, and in that, I recognize I'm a little different to a lot of people that are in the lifestyle. Um, I am literally using this to connect.
Sure.
So you asked what my psychological space is. I would say that it is um, allowing my dominant to see me and experience me at my most vulnerable and accept me and value me as an equal afterwards.
Sure.
This is where the rubber meets the road. So the parts of me that are tricky, my triggers are from wanting someone to just see and understand me, not find me too much or not enough, all of these narratives that we play in our head.
Sure.
So objectification is someone witnessing your humanity, deep intimacy, and essentially you're just asking for connection.
So if you were to
Perfect.
change that around though, let's go a different route. What if somebody then during degradation scene or humiliation,
Mm,
it would be more along the lines of degradation, and we removed a personal pronoun and we throw an adjective in there like unusable factoid.
mm, mm,
And it's not just the word as a descriptor, it also would have to be matched by tone.
mm. I would find that very difficult. And I think that this is where, we can approach that safely by putting our psyche in the right hands. Good partner selection.
Right.
Um, these things they take time and patience. I don't view that as something that you would rush into. Um, I think that I think that personally, I don't ask for things in my dynamic. However, my dominant is an amazingly healthy and creative one. He shows a very vivid interest in dissecting me and wanting to learn how I tick.
Did
So,
you hear that, Miss? Did you hear that dominant listening? That she's very much amped up, ready for some electro play.
because I hate electro. He will ask me about my preferences, and then have the final say on whether he deploys those preferences or not. Sometimes I get my way, other times I don't. But your boundaries are negotiated. Um, I do want anything that happens to me to be a little unplanned, because I less resonate with scening as treating my dynamic as a perpetual scene. Um, and sometimes that's steered towards what I need rather than what I want. So if we're looking at saying things to me that I would find challenging or hurtful, I would imagine in his case the only reason he would do so is if he had um, some methodical approach to stripping ego away, which objectification can be very good for. I would hope that he would then invite my feedback and combine that with the responses during play to help inform sort of future scenes and how that might go. Um, yeah, good vetting.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
That's the big
having a good.
process that we go through, so we make sure that we're both on the right. We're on the same page entering a scene.
Well, I
So
think the people who do that as well, the people who actually ask for things to be quite um, abrasive, generally are still choosing people they've developed a really solid friendship foundation and rapport with. Perhaps they have a romantic connection to, but they get to rewrite essentially a narrative. Maybe they believe it about themselves,
that's so
maybe they don't.
interesting. So interesting you framed it that way because I was literally just about to say it is about a narrative. And the interesting
Mm,
part is the deeper the trust that we build, it's kind of almost, well, I want to say this very lightly because I don't want people to take this, but it is almost like a form of what we call exposure therapy, where we're gradually being exposed to the concept of something that does trouble us, and we're facing that fear
mhm,
inside of a lifestyle as well. I'm I'm currently I have clients that are I'm taking through exposure therapy due to abuse, and it centers around an object. So it's about introduction. But when you're talking about into this realm, we're talking about going deep inside of that because the trust is highly established, and we know it's almost the harder they push, the more degrading they are, the more abuse that comes. It's not coming from a place of hate or
Yeah.
disgust or not wanting. We actually have to go to those levels because that trust and care, I would even I'll hesitate a little bit to say love is there.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
I
Um, um,
I mean, look at like, for example, I don't know, I'll throw something really wild out there, like burying somebody underground. There has to
mm,
be an element of love there. You are
mm,
risking a lot. You're doing a risk profile and assessment, or if you are going to do breath play or waterboarding, you are talking about getting into some dangerous areas that require a lot
mm,
of fortitude. But if you're pushing each other, it's because you're pushing the boundaries of your relationship to its next evolution. And
yeah.
inside of this, especially when we adding in the element of degradation,
Mm,
through or because of objectification, we sometimes have to search at a deeper level to find the ways to humiliate someone consistently that are new, just
mm,
because we want to humiliate them, because we care about them. I
mm,
couldn't do a scene with you, for example, that's as hardcore as I do with the person attached to me, because there's no connection there. I can't take you to those levels and say those things, because me saying to you what I've done in the past would just be hurtful.
mm. And this is where, people look on other people's dynamics and they say, you're so lucky.
Oh,
You're
I
so
hate
lucky
that
you
word.
want what you have. Yeah. And work and time go into these things. You shouldn't start off, you should try and dull that frenzy. You shouldn't be starting off. There's a certain lure of wanting to leave things at a place where you can want more rather than going too far. But I think, as you say, there's depth to knowing someone over time. You need to be very aware of even their nonverbal cues or just anything that's going to signal to you a greater understanding of what their experience is. And I'm willing to bet that you had some idea of what the experience might be before it had even started, let alone
Oh,
during.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Because you're also even talking about we get to the point when we're in a dynamic deep enough and have an extensive amount of time. And when I say extensive, I'm usually talking more than 6 months. First 6 months, we're still feeling each other out. The sex is really awesome, even the
Oh,
first
longer.
year.
Yes.
But we're now
Right.
talking about, I'm looking at physiological responses, psychosomatic responses to an interrogation scene. I'm watching, physical responses change as far as breathing goes. We're monitoring all these things, and we get to the point when we're in certain dynamics that it's just automatic. I know if she breathes one way, oh, she's excited. Well, if I'm not going for excitement and I'm going for terror, I change. But I know that if we've been in something that's terror and she needs to be brought back down to feel safe, it's a subtle change, a different direction. The
Mm,
breathing changes again, and she's regained her equilibrium. It is about
mm,
all of these delicate balances between understanding. I have to, I do want to comment on the lucky thing. I've never understood. You're so lucky you've met him, or you're so lucky you found. That's not luck. As luck has zero to do with it. Somebody recently wrote on social media on FetLife a whole thing about luck. And I thought it was a really well done piece, because there's nothing lucky about two people. They have worked extensively hard to get to know each other and talk and disclose information and build that rapport to the point then, hey, yeah, let's go ahead and meet for coffee maybe after a couple of weeks or even a month. And all right, cool. Now we've been talking for 3 months. We're starting to negotiate things, and we're going to head into that for it. It is a lot of time. And you're right that I see it's why, like, I hammer away on consent and I hammer away on communication and effort, because these are the fundamental things we need before we are talking about waterboarding people or putting somebody and making them into a table so we can stick a bunch of sashimi all over their body and have a dinner
Mm,
party, because
mm,
we can't get to that level of trust with them. We can't be, somebody's not going to be willing to be objectified by us, regardless if I want to objectify them, if there isn't
mm,
anything established, if they don't see any consistency in their actions to have built up respect and trust. They're not going to
mm,
believe we're not going to do something beyond our words.
mm.
So it is that constant, escalation and evolution in our relationships. And I, it's the one thing that I'm seeing a steady rise in currently inside of my practice is why are things falling off? And they're falling off at like the 18-month mark. And I'm
Okay.
like, well, how often are you talking?
Mm,
Well, if we talk now, it's just about sex or the lifestyle. And I'm like, what about the rest of your life? Where are you at?
mm.
And it's like crickets. And I'm like, well, so that's where we have to start. We have to go back to a basic fundamental understanding. We never go back to the beginning. And so many people long for the beginning of a relationship. I'm like, well, you don't ever get back to you can get back to some of the feelings, but you've now evolved into a relationship, and the
I
relationship
think
becomes its own life.
people rely too much on the chemistry involved in NRE. Men have this very natural um, desire for pursuit of women that can either lead to promiscuity or it can be this serial monogamy thing where, like you say, a year and a half in, things are fizzling out. We don't recognize that literally from a scientific point of view, our hormones are changing to a bonding, for a bonding recipe between two people,
Hmm.
which if you lean into that, takes you to absolutely amazing places, but people would prefer to get stuck in this perpetual loop of chasing those, sparks,
The
which
initial
are
endorphin
nine
rush of meeting
times
somebody.
a crock of shit. And or people will not view conflict as a normal, healthy conflict, a normal component of relationships. So as soon as they are having faced with any kind of argument, they feel like, well, this person must not be for me. And they sort of jettison out of the relationship, go and find something that they deem to be easier, hit that year and a half mark, and surprise, it's happening all over again because relationships actually take work and compromise and evolving together. And essentially, dating one person over a long period of time. My husband and I have been together 16, 17 years. I have dated many versions of him during that time, and the same goes the other way. You know,
There are many
it,
versions of him. This one is mine. Did you
oh,
mention Kubrick earlier? A little Full Metal Jacket reference for you.
yeah, full metal jacket. Thank you. Yes,
Yes.
it took my brain a minute.
Yep.
You're talking about the vulnerability of fairly extreme objectification, but for me, it can even be much simpler than that. Like the subtlety, say, of in my rope space, sometimes leave me feeling very vulnerable because of exposure.
Sure.
If I am naked in rope, which I sometimes am, and my rigger is able to stalk around and observe me from any angle that he likes, poke and prod me, that can be objectifying, and that is something that I could not do with just anyone that I hadn't developed a very healthy level of trust with. Um, women have women have this societal pressure on us, but a very beautiful ability to sort of adorn ourselves with jewelry, fashion, hair, makeup. And it is a privilege of being feminine. It's lovely, but I
Sure.
think there can be equal beauty in undecorating ourselves. So being raw and primitive and gorgeous, in a natural state or an unkempt state, and we're looking at kink and we're thinking about women, applying hair and makeup perfectly to be destroyed and stripped of poise, stripped of your ego. Little ego deaths are really good fodder for the soul and bring you sort of closer to your true self and closer to the person that you're sharing it with. People who enjoy, I don't know if you're a sadist who enjoys dacrophilia, but that's sort of
Talk about
messing
making
with.
somebody cry.
Yes.
Do you not hear the smile on my face?
It's a fact. Our fantasies in kink or intentional power exchange dynamics, there are ways that we can safely experiment with social hierarchy, and we have very few outlets that are immersive to this degree that won't negatively impact on our lives. So we can read a book, we can watch movies, we can play video games, but none of those allow us to actually feel a different social status,
Sure.
one that might be below our current social standing. That's really fascinating. Like, what realizations can that direct us towards? Being worth less than someone, but not worthless, if that makes any sense.
No, that it makes absolute sense. But the end of the day, though, we have given the power and the autonomy inside of the power exchange because it's our happy place to do so, and we know at the end of the day, hopefully, I'm going to say it like that. Hopefully, it's not going to be
Mm.
abused or mistreated. And
Mm.
when we are, I really think if you get inside of the degradation world, I would almost have to argue at the harder you go, the harder you care. I know when I'm in an intense interrogation scene with my slave, I'm pushing and saying awful shit, and I
Yeah.
know it's awful, but we'll talk about it, a week beforehand, and she's like, I can take it, and I'm like, okay, and so I can bring it, and she says yes, and you have to go to these new places when you're creating these scenes or whatever you're trying to get out of the interrogation while you're holding their face down and a bowl of refried beans and calling them names while you're poking them with a coat hanger. You have to.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't put the care into the scene to bring pleasure to the two of us and say the things that I know that are going to invoke the emotional response and or terror that I'm after, I wouldn't
Mm.
care and I wouldn't be in it. And if I know that she knows that if I'm not doing these things, I'm not living up to the expectation of what I can bring out of her.
Yeah.
And it's hard because when you talk about people in professional settings, you're like, oh, this is what you do privately, but it is in this realm where I think you're actually finding, as far as degradation goes, or even in the broader sense of objectification, because it's such a big umbrella,
Mm.
the depth of care that you are taking to construct these things for the person you're objectifying
Mm.
has to be created within a massive amount of emotional consideration.
Yes, she's protected at the same time. But
Oh
there
yeah,
are parts of you that are perhaps, so that are not generally accepted by society. She's providing you with an outlet for those, which is amazing. Consciousness raising then isn't a means to an end, but an end in itself. We should always be inquiring of ourselves: who are we? What do we need? So on my end of the spectrum, it's generally accepted um, societal orthodoxy says I'm supposed to be a confident, self-assured woman who only enjoys sex with men who respect me, and I must be treated with dignity, and that's still relevant, right?
right.
But
No, I know. I'm
that,
just giggling at that thought because I see a lot of this feminism out there
yeah,
stipulating that, and the reality is that they're no longer happy with the feminist movement inside of the males that they are
right,
now encountering, and they're quite unhappy with them because they're not strong, possessive, or anything else. And that's
Masculine, yes. So
it's
the orthodoxy doesn't address the complexity of human desire. You know, we can have quite a contradictory mix of feelings.
absolutely
We don't have to be, yeah, we don't have to be just one. Our minds are kind of essentially built for imagining and playing and experiencing, experimenting, and I can feel shame in objectification as a psychological state. But if I remove the pearl clutching, I can reframe those acts and feelings entirely. You know, I believe in women's rights, but I'm also attracted to male authority.
right.
And I think that every contradiction that you admit empowers you to be more fully who you are without apology or explanation. And there's authenticity and whimsy and intrigue in contradiction for me. Um, as long as we are choosing people that can access and hold that safely.
Sure.
Mm.
Let let me say this because I just looked at, I've always enjoyed talking to you, and the time just kind of flew by.
Mm.
What advice or insights would you like to share, as we kind of wind down, about the understanding and the psychological and emotional dimensions that of objectification within our lifestyle, and what can people take away from this conversation today?
Ooh.
I know it
Um,
wasn't on the approved question list.
I think um, on a broader scale, society has always been just fine with violence, right? And a little bit less okay with it when it's combined with sex. And I find that really interesting. I think that we can go to these places without feeling it's important for people who are in the lifestyle not to attribute shame to their desire, to their sexual blueprint. Um, but being risk aware, it's your responsibility to be risk aware. Um, Consent, we talk a lot about consent, and oh, I have so many bugbears with the way that it's framed for new people arriving on the scene. Check that this person goes to events, check that this person has mutual friends or that they're not in the community. That is not a safeguard for anything. Um, Consent can't be fully informed until after the fact. When you're looking at psychological play or any kind of edge play, we can be risk aware. It's like if you are expecting to become parents and you can read every book under the sun and you can attend workshops and have all the communication that you want with people who have done the thing. But until you have done the thing, none of that accurately reflects reality. So I have an issue with informed consent.
Sure.
Hindsight is the true teacher. I don't think that we can have that until we're there. Um, and I think that everyone must choose very carefully. People must tiptoe into I love to say emergent DS is authentic DS. So you can want all of the yummy things, or submissives, our headspace tends to be to want to give, 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 give of ourselves when we find someone, worthy of adoration and worship and service. But it's okay to tread carefully, and you give a little and you get a little, and you build that over time. If we're looking at things that can leave you with psychological harm, you need to be very sure about the people that you're engaging with. I think that's probably the most important thing.
Well, I appreciate it, and I agree. Like we tend to, I think, a lot in kink, which is kind of why I started doing this show. I don't know, God, it's coming up on 2 years, oddly enough. Um,
Amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's a little ways away, but yeah, I think there is a massive component that I tend to like to talk about is that we often don't have. Well, we have the conversations about physical safety and scene safety and post scene recovery and aftercare. But I think
Mm,
one thing that we tend to miss out on a lot is the psychological or the emotional component, because
mm,
they have a lot much long lasting effects beyond a
mm,
scene. It's why people
mm,
can float 2 or 3 weeks later and still feel it. They can still
mm,
feel the sensations long after the bruises are gone, because we're having these somatic responses to the things
mm,
we've encountered, but we don't
mm,
put a lot of thought or effort. I won't say everybody. I think we should put more thought and more effort into that aspect of kink to understand what where is it going to take us next? How could this emotionally affect me if somehow I fell asleep, and how am I going to feel if I wake up and Brooke's on top of me beating me with a bat? Yeah, I'm probably not going to be too happy about that,
mm.
and I'm never going to forget it, and I know she's going to run for her life all the way to
That
the other
doesn't
side of the planet.
seem like something I would do.
Yeah, I know, but everybody, you never know what kind of fantasy somebody's lurking around with. But
Yeah.
it is there are all of these things that we don't consider, and I think some of these when we really get talking about headspace,
Mm,
objectification, degradation, humiliation, interrogation, even you know when you're talking about making into someone into human furniture, we're neglecting the emotional. We are neglecting a little bit of the emotional and the psychological outfits. That was the one thing that I really enjoyed when I talked about needle play with Miss Kitten out of South Africa, when she said that one of her components before she gets involved with somebody is she does her own kind of mini psychological assessment to make sure they're in a proper headspace a week before, a couple of days before, and day of,
oh,
that they're ready to go, that
that's
something
great.
hasn't changed. Yeah,
Yep.
it's it's something that I don't know. I've incorporated it more now in my dynamic over the last years. I'm constantly, are you ready? Are you still feeling it? Oh, I've got a little bit of a sniffles. If I even hear, if there's something that could disrupt the scene ends. And it's not the end. And I think that's another thing people should understand. It's not the end of the world if we have to stop a scene. There is always next time, but it's better to be
Yeah.
in it 100% than it is to be there 75%, because that's the moment things are going to break down. And I like what you said here, because you're saying, submissives have this drive to want to please, and dominants want that position to exert that authority. But if we're
Mm,
not communicating to each other exactly that we're both 100%, because I've seen doms as well, they're not there. I've seen them, they've been checked out, mistakes happen, they mishit somebody, or they're missing their cue to do a rope tie, or they're missing something, they're not
mm.
there, and we get afraid that we're letting somebody down. And I'm like, it's not a competition.
It's funny because true submission isn't submitting to only the things that you like, right? It's not showing up and asking, for which implements you want, how, when, or, submitting only when it's easy to do so. That might be kink with elements of BDSM, but I don't
Sure.
feel as though that's genuine authority transfer. And it's not a competition. There's no hierarchy. It just is different. So you may need to do things that are difficult for you or things you positively hate, right? And those are opportunities for you to see your submission shining in its fullest capacity. That is true surrender. But when there are people mislabeling themselves as dominants, and that's happening a fair bit, your original question was what for, people who are new to the scene and what they need to look out for. I think early in my journey, that was one of the things that I wasn't properly aware of. You join vet, you give yourself a label. My first label was evolving because I was quite cognizant of not misrepresenting myself. However, there are a bunch of people who uh, enjoy kinky sex don't realize that wanting to choke someone doesn't even almost equal dominance and its related responsibilities, and yet
Sure.
there's no psychological testing
No,
that
no, we don't do any
prevents
of
you
that
from
in something
labeling.
that's a hobby.
Yes. And so you said that your other interviewee performed some of her own tests, and I think that's incredible. Not just as an initial negotiation tactic, but ongoing. That's lovely.
Yeah, it
And
was it was it was very enlightening when we got to that point that she had brought that up. I had talked about what's the preparation coming up into doing a needle scene, and she'd mentioned that, and it kind of just it really shifted the conversation into a different direction. Um,
hmm,
but yeah, it's all these wonderful things, and God, I know I could probably spend another couple of hours talking to you, and I know I've taken up your time today. I really thank you
pleasure.
for, spending this hour with me and chatting
Of
away
course,
and illuminating a subject that's it's much broader, for me. A lot of times, like I said, I kind of place objectification and into straightforward. I put it in one category for myself. Um, but it's when I talk to people, then I'm like, oh well, you know what? You see it this way, and I can see it that way now, and I appreciate that.
of course. It's nice to get everyone's different interpretations of things. It paints a bigger picture of literally any aspect of BDSM. And these conversations are what build community and what help for people to broaden their perspective and respect each other's opinions. And so you're doing wonderful work. Thank you.
Well, we all try. Well, everybody, that's going to bring us to the end of today's episode. If you follow me, definitely on Spotify, please like and subscribe. This is the first time if you're listening, or rate me 5 stars so others can find us and I can keep having more wonderful conversations with Brooke and many, many others. I know there's going to probably be another conversation with Brooke here in the future. You sparked something me a thought. It's not flushed out yet, Brooke, but it's going to be something on submission. So I'm gonna have to take some time and sit down and think about it. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're gonna dive into that one. I think we need to go a little bit. We're gonna have to go deep. Let me put my head around it. I'll spend some time thinking about it. Um, but with that being said, until next time, everybody, be safe and stay kinky.